Begin Self-Publishing, episode number 94. The Benefits of Community with Catherine Carrigan.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
Not long before I went to the London Book Fair, I was contacted by Catherine Carrigan to do a presentation to their What is Social Media Today community about, strangely enough, social media. One thing that impressed me about their little community that I have of authors is it seemed quite a sort of close-knit group. And I thought it would be interesting to have her on the show to talk about community in general. Now, she's an intuitive healer, which does sound a little bit woo-woo to me, but she seems nice enough, and the whole group she was in seemed to be full of authors from all sorts of different genres. And I think actually something that I've neglected in my own author journey is reaching out and making connections with other authors. So I thought it would be interesting to hear a bit more about this. So now over to the interview. Hello, Catherine. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you everyone out there in the audience for taking your time to listen.
Now, you've come to my attention because I gave an online webinar in your community, What is Social Media Today? What do you think is the benefit to authors of joining something like a community like that?
Well, first of all, Tim, as you know from personal experience, writing of itself is a very solitary profession. You've got to be by yourself in order to do the work. You don't necessarily have to be an introvert because lots of famous authors like Tom Clancy, Ernest Hemingway, Paul Coelho, Salman Rushdie, Goethe, Mark Twain, they are or were extroverts, okay? But the act of writing in itself, you do all by your lonesome. So there are 4 great benefits that I see for having community as a writer and as an author. And this has helped sustain me as I have just published my 7th book. So the 4 benefits of community. So the first one that I would like to talk about is co-creation. So one of my best friends here in Atlanta is a fellow best-selling author, Amazon #1 best-selling author, Maxine Taylor. Maxine's got 7 Amazon #1 bestsellers. I only have 4 Amazon #1 bestsellers out of my 7 books. And I joke with her, hey, you're the one to beat. And she just says, hey, honey, I'm just a little bit older than you. So periodically what we do is we have our own little mini mastermind group and we get together for lunch. Now, this happened pretty organically as friendships usually do. We got together for lunch. She was a great example for me early on about how to be a generous author because at one of our first lunches, she handed over the contact information for her Twitter guru, her editor, and her amazing Amazon marketing lady. So as our friendship progressed, we would get together and talk about the books we were working on. And she gave me plenty of good advice about, write about this, don't write about that. Nobody cares about this, but everybody cares about that. She's interviewed me on her radio show more than any other radio show host. And then we also talk about, she's asked me, what can I do to make more money? And she's an astrologer, Georgia's first licensed astrologer. So I came up with the idea. I said, you need to do something called the Trumpology report, which is using astrology to help people understand the newly elected President Donald Trump and his associates. So from there, I'm a medical intuitive healer. That's my main profession. So Maxine asked me to do a series of medical intuitive readings about Donald Trump, about White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, and First Lady Melania Trump. And from these, I wrote blogs. Now, I've also worked with her to help her develop the idea for the next book that she's writing. So in our program at whatisocialmediatoday.com, my partner, Ramajan Kogan, he's a mountain biker. I'm a medical intuitive healer. Rama's a mountain biker. We are the unlikeliest of friends. However, we're fellow authors. Now, one of the things to really think about is this strategy of survival. So if you look at the world's largest living organism, the world's largest living organism is something called Pando the trembling giant. And what it really is, a series of quaking aspen, actually happened to be one organism, 160 acres of trees. And they work together. And if you think about it, even though I'm an author and I write books about natural healing, and Tim, you write time travel books, we are both representatives of this writer archetype. And, you know, we've, just like the quaking aspen who are being threatened by overgrazing from deer and elk, the writing profession and the book writing profession is threatened by multimedia, by the social media, by movies, by YouTube, and all these other up and coming things. So the more that we learn to band together to act as one living, breathing organism, the more likely I feel our profession will continue to thrive. So co-creation is a big one. The next one is actually counseling, because if you're a writer, you're sooner or later you're going to get stuck. I'm in a Facebook community with the writer Jeff Goins, and he put out a little post recently saying, "Who's stuck?" And I responded back and I said, you know, I think writing is the process of getting stuck and then getting unstuck. So recently a friend of mine who's working on his first novel asked me for advice. Now you would think that, you know, he would be the beneficiary of our interactions, but any time that I as an author take the time to reflect on what I'm actually doing, then I get to study my own process and refine it and hopefully over time get better. Another author friend of mine, Indica Di Francesca, was stuck one day. So he reached out to me also through Facebook. And I ended up writing a blog called 3 Ways to Go After Inspiration Other Than with a Club. So the more that we help each other out, the more that we refine our own process and we develop this community, so that when we do go by ourselves to write, I happen to write early in the morning. I wake up early, 4 or 5 in the morning, and start writing first thing. Then I don't feel alone because I have these people who I know are supporting me. Now, the third C in this cooperation is cross-blogging. Now, I regularly, individually, encourage other author friends of mine to cross-blog with me. So I will publish one of your blogs for every blog of mine that you publish. When I do that, I put in a picture of your book or your books, plural, links to your website and your bios. And the benefits of this cross-blogging are legion. My fans learn about your books, your business, your worldview, and your fans discover about my books, my business as a medical intuitive healer, and absorb my opinions. So this is spreading our ideas and our books throughout the internet. And this is the epitome of win-win, and nobody spends a dime on advertising. So this could be the seed of viral marketing, especially when we develop networks of authors willing to cross-blog as I have. And frequently, I'll get a little message either by email or through Facebook of somebody saying, gee, I really like that blog. May I share it that you wrote? May I share it with my folks? And I'm like, of course. Or people will send me a message saying, hey, I just wrote about this subject that I think your fans would like to hear about. And I'm happy, always happy to promote my friends. Which brings me to the last C, which is cross-promotion. Now, one lady in our program, Lynn Cochran Murphy, published her second book. She had the benefit not only of the knowledge she had gained in our program of how to market through the social media, she also had a wonderful community of fellow authors to support her. Now, Unfolding the Mystery of Self, her second book, reached #1 in one of her categories on Amazon even before the book launch officially started. By the time it was all over, her new book had reached #1, not in just one category, but 3 categories on Amazon. So she had way bigger book sales. And on top of that, she told me, she said, I had the best January ever in terms of her business. Now, our community has cross-blogged with her. We've shared her book throughout our Facebook friends and our Twitter feeds, and also talked among each other about working through the nitty-gritty details. So, if you think about it, most people who work in a conventional office or business, they've got other people who are working with them. But when you're just all by your lonesome writing your time travel books or writing your books about natural healing, you could fall into the belief system that there's nobody out there willing to support you. But nobody understands what you go through as much as fellow authors. And when you cooperate with fellow authors, I feel you're going to win even bigger. So that in a nutshell are my 4 C's of cooperation amongst a community of writers. Again, it's co-creation, counseling, cross-blogging, and cross-promotion.
Okay. I mean, I know your community is fairly, well, I mean, I know there's at least more than 10 people, I think, probably in it. What sort of numbers of people are cross-promoting with each other? I mean, do you find there's like an optimum number? Or do people, I mean, I've seen authors share a blog in effect, so they each write sort of 4 people and each people write a post or 1 post a week.
Well, one of the things that we talk about is that nobody wins the game of social media by yourself.
Yeah.
And nobody succeeds as an author by yourself. You've got to develop readers. And as you develop raving fans, then they will tell their friends about you. And even if you don't have any readers to start out with, if you develop friendships with other authors, when you promote them, they will be willing to promote you. This is the law of good karma. So if I promote, for example, Tim, when you do your next book release, I would recommend that you send me a message and ask me to share about your book on Twitter and on Facebook, which I will be more than happy to do, because when I do my next book launch, I would just love to reach out to you and say, hey, will you share this with your friends and followers? So even a brand new author starting from zero, you can begin to create a tribe of readers through your fellow authors. And for example, I'm writing about natural healing. You're writing about time travel. So even if I was writing about time travel, our books are going to be different. Even if you're writing about natural healing, our books are going to be different. You have to realize that you as an author have a unique voice and a unique contribution to make. So when you get out of survival mode and realize that the most successful living organism is actually one organism, this grove of aspen trees, then you are going to want to form community with as many authors as you can.
So how do you handle, let's say that somebody was writing a book about a topic that you really didn't agree with, and they had promoted your book. Would you feel the need to promote it? I mean, and the similar issue with the cross-blogging. I mean, let's say you've got 5 of you in the community and one of the person's blogs is basically terrible. I mean, is there an element of looking at quality control, or should you just be more sort of open and maybe just go back to the person and say, like, well, could you improve this, this and this? How do you deal with those kind of issues with community?
Yeah, I think there's really 2 ways of looking at it. First of all, we have to, so for example, I know you've done this and I've experienced myself. There have been times when I've written something and I thought, oh my God, this is the most beautiful, brilliant thing I've ever written. And then nobody cares. And then other times I just jot something down, in a hurry. For example, the most well-read article on my website, CatherineCarrigan.com, I probably wrote in 30 minutes. And I just had an idea. I thought, I really need to write about the difference between pain and suffering. I wrote that blog in 2013. Somebody reads that article literally every day of my life. So my first comment is that I think we have to acknowledge with due humility that I'm not necessarily the best judge of quality. I may read somebody's article and think, this is dribble, nobody will care, and there it is. I mean, for example, look at who's the president of the United States. There's a lot of people who didn't think that he was worthy of being president. So you can't judge. I think you have to be humble about it and realize that if somebody has sat down and put pen to paper or, fingers on the keyboard and written something, that there may be an audience out there for what they have to say. Now, I have encountered some of what you're talking about. I have a fellow author friend who is a transgender individual, or cross-dressing. I don't think he's transgender. He's cross-dresser. And my marketing lady approached me one day. Obviously, I'm not naming this individual. And she said, Catherine, I cannot promote his work. She said, I can't even read a paragraph. It's not just pornographic. It's filthy and offensive. And I said to her, we all have our own community standards. So if I had somebody who was writing something that was violent or obscene, I might say to that person, this is not the forum for this sort of material. This is not, I'm not your community. But there's probably other places where that would fit. So I would either encourage that individual to rewrite it in such a way that wasn't so pornographic. So in the case of the example of the author, I have a friend actually who's working with that individual to not just remove the completely disgustingly obscene information, but to make the story a little bit better. But in that case, that individual that I'm discussing, he wanted to be part of our original group. And I encouraged my business partner, Ramajan Kogan, to work with him individually because I didn't feel that he would be a good fit for our group. So I think, whenever you have a group, you want to maintain the comfort and safety of everybody concerned. But as far as quality, I tend to be on the more humble side and realize that you may write something that I think is awful and 95% of my readers is going to think it's the best thing they've ever read. So I tend to err on the side of humility on that one.
Okay, if we come back to the counselling part, where it seemed like what you're suggesting there is that you form almost like a relationship with somebody either further ahead or behind you in their sort of publishing journey. Because I know that you try and put people together in terms of sort of almost like accountability buddies and things. How do you come to the process of working out who should be counselling who and how those situations should work?
Well, I think, as you know, we all have personalities, and some people really tend to get along with each other and have, good communication. And I think it's more about the quality of communication than about who's farther along. For example, I feel that I personally benefit when a writer who's maybe even working on their first book asks me a question, because it makes me stop and think. How do you get your ego out of the way to write a book? Well, it makes me remember what I do. And at the same time, I obviously benefit from talking to writers who are far more accomplished than I do. I feel I can learn from anybody. So I think that the entire process of just reflecting on what you're doing, whether it's writing or publishing or marketing or promotion, the more aware you are, the more successful you're going to be. One of the things that I always talk to my clients about is even when you're doing well, figure out what you are doing well, sort of analyze yourself so that it becomes a repeatable process. So, for example, if I write a blog, I've written blogs, I'll write it on Sunday morning, and by the end of the day, over 1,000 people have read it. Well, then I look at that. What was it about? What was the subject matter? How did I write it in such a way that really struck with people? So we want to reflect on what we're doing so that we can be even more successful. So the informal counseling of other authors is part of that self-reflection process, I think.
So in terms of your books, you clearly are writing what is very specialist non-fiction books. Is there any general advice you give to, say, somebody who's in a similar position? They've got their fundamental career in terms of what they work on, and they want to write a book about it and use that book as a way to kind of get more clients and do things. Have you got any general advice in that area?
Yes. First of all, it goes back to the scarcity mentality. We need to let go of the scarcity mentality. I feel I can give away every bit of information that I know and still have plenty of business, because people need somebody to hold their hand and put them together. So whether it's whatissocialmediatoday.com, where we're holding your hand and helping you learn social media and showing you what you're doing right or wrong, or whether it's in natural healing. I mean, I've got plenty of business as a medical intuitive healer, helping people understand what's really going on with their body. So frequently my books, when I write a book, Tim, I try to make it as comprehensive as possible. I try not to leave anything out. So for example, my book, Unlimited Energy Now, goes over how to have more energy. This is applicable whether you're a writer or a CEO or a cyclist or a stay-at-home mom. Everything we do requires energy. So I go over what's happening, how you can build the energy on the physical level, on the energetic level, on the emotional, on the mental, and the spiritual. And I view my writing of books as several things. It's part of my legacy when I'm dead and gone in the ground, which could happen tomorrow if I get hit by a bus. What I leave behind is my books. And secondly, there are always individuals who do not have the financial resources maybe to work with me one-on-one, but I can say, hey, go read my book. One of the things that I do in my business is I offer a free 15-minute consultation. And last week it was, in fact, I got a call from a lady who's a housekeeper. She cleans houses for a living. And she called for a free 15-minute consult. Obviously, she wasn't able to afford my services one-on-one, but I said, hey, you can download my audiobooks. Each audiobook you can get for less than $5. And here's all the information that I would explain to you if I was working with you one-on-one. So it's our legacy, it's give back, and also it is a way of establishing yourself as an authority on a subject. So that way people will know, hey, if I'm exhausted, I can turn to Catherine and she can help me get my energy back. She can figure out where I'm losing my energy and what will work to help me get better. So I'm kind of like a little detective. But I put all the information about that subject in the book. So don't be afraid to give it all away, because it's going to come back to you. That's the law of karma. You can't outgive God. And again, some people also look at books from a purely financial point of view. When I think about the financial returns on my books, I don't just think in terms of number of books sold, although obviously I have sold books to be, have gotten 4 of my books to number 1 on Amazon, including to my 2 books on social media marketing. I'm looking at what's the overall net effect on my business. So for example, last year in 2016, my overall revenues were up 32% over my revenues in 2015. So that shows me that everything that I'm doing, the book marketing, the book writing, and the social media marketing, it's all working together to get the message out and positively benefiting my bottom line. So it's definitely a way to go. The other piece of advice that I give to people is make audiobooks. Audiobooks are the fastest growing segment of the publishing industry. And I myself, you're listening to me, I don't think my voice is that great. I hired a professional reader. Just like James Earl Jones, the actor, I could listen to James Earl Jones read the phone book and be happy. You have a great voice, Tim Lewis. I hope you're making audiobooks of your book. But I hired a professional reader and made audiobooks of 4 of my most recent books, and this makes it more accessible. So the more that we as author can think about how can I make books more accessible, then that you're going to increase your sales and your audience that way.
Okay, I've got a couple of follow-up questions there. I presume when you're saying number one Amazon bestsellers, you're talking about in the categories that your books are in.
Absolutely.
The other thing is about your audiobooks. I've covered that on previous shows, but did you go through ACX and Audible for your audiobooks?
Yes, all my audiobooks were uploaded to Audible and ACX. Again, the wonderful thing, a lot of people talk about how, the world's going to hell. I don't particularly believe that. I feel that today, as authors, we have more advantages than ever before. The fact that here we are, you're in the UK, I'm in the US, and we're having this conversation, which will go out to benefit a worldwide audience, that's huge. So with audiobooks, absolutely upload them to Audible and ACX. My audiobook producer is in Arizona, and my business partner is in Hawaii. And when we do our program at whatisocialmediatoday.com, we have authors from literally all over the world who tune in at a specific time. And then we're meeting with them one-on-one. So yes, Audible and ACX and great platforms. And I feel that if you as an author are not making an audiobook, you're leaving money on the table and you're neglecting a huge growth opportunity for your audience.
Yeah, I certainly think I haven't actually done audiobooks yet, so I'm guilty of that. But
you've got a great voice.
I think with non-fiction, it's almost a no-brainer. Anyway, I think that wraps up most of the interview. How can people find out about you and your business and also all your books and obviously about what is social media today?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for listening. My name is Catherine Carrigan, Catherine, last name Carrigan, CARRIGAN.com. You can find out about my work as a medical intuitive at CatherineCarrigan.com. I do offer a free 15-minute consult with clients anywhere in the world, either by phone or Skype or Zoom video conference. And with my books, you can find all my books on Amazon. My number one bestsellers include What is Healing? Awaken Your Intuitive Power for Health and Happiness, Unlimited Energy Now, Banish the Blues Now, and Unlimited Intuition Now. All I have to do is I've got them hung up behind me on the wall. I can just read them off the wall. And then my two recent books about social media marketing include, they both start out with What is Social Media Today? The first one is Get Ready to Win the Game of Social Media. And the second one is What is Social Media Today? Keywords, hashtags, and you, oh my. Now, if you're interested in our program at whatisocialmediatoday.com and being part of our community, we'd love to have you. If you're curious about the program, you can come and be a guest on one of our webinars. We meet every Saturday. You can also get a free consultation either with myself or with my fellow Amazon #1 bestseller selling author Ramajan Kogan. So we are very passionate about this program because so many people are really great at writing the books and then nothing happens. And they're seriously disappointed. I'm a self-published author. Interestingly enough, I had both experiences because my first book was published in 1997, back in the old day of publishing. It was published by a traditional publisher. It was the best-selling book of the original publisher. And interestingly enough, I made $3,000 for 3 years' work. And that is why I stopped writing books. And then what happened to me, Tim, was one of my clients in Los Angeles found my book translated into Chinese in the Los Angeles library. And I thought, gee, if I wrote a book good enough to be translated into Chinese, I should do this again. So in 2012, I published my second book. And I'm a big believer in what you're doing, Tim, and helping people self-publish because it is the way. This is the way, self-publish. And I've talked to lots of people who've gone on to bigger publishers, and I asked them, well, how's it working for you? And they said, same old rat race. If you're an author, you have to learn not just how to write the book, you have to learn how to market the book. And that is why Rama and I started whatisocialmediatoday.com to help you be even more successful and to set up this community where you can get the support you need to take your business and your books to the next level.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being on the show today, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Tim. And thanks everybody out there for listening.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.